Welcome to DejaVue.
It's your favorite Vue podcast and you just don't know it yet. Or you probably do because, this is the 51st episode here and it's almost a year. It's out there with all the special episodes. We're almost at 52 and I think the year has 52 weeks. We're almost at the year. And I think the very first episode we recorded, which will probably never come out, maybe as a little special at some point so people can listen to it. It was chaotic, but things changed, we improved, and have a lot of fun every week here. If you don't know who Vue is, because maybe it's your first episode joining or saw an amazing short out there, okay, well, let's listen to the episode here about, Volar and Angular and JetBrains and WebStorm, then you're right here in this episode. And I'm here with my lovely co-host, Michael Thiessen, who is a full-time content creator around the Vue and Nuxt ecosystem. Michael, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. And I'm here with Alex, who's on the Nuxt core team. He's not the Nuxt core team. That would be
too much.
A lot to put on one person.
True.
And creating content on YouTube as always. How are you doing?
Fine. Actually, pretty exciting day so far. A lot of things on the plate as usual. And of course, as in so many episodes, it's the two of us. We have some more technical topics, like some deep dives. But every now and then, quite more regular recently, we also get amazing guests. And we have one here as well. We have the lovely Jan-Niklas Wortmann with us. It's you. How are you doing, Jan-Niklas?
Pretty good. Cannot complain. I can't complain. There's actually a snowstorm going on in Kansas City, so it's pretty cold. And I don't like it.
So a typical German thing. Oh, the weather. It's
it's the worst.
Well, if it's anything like what we've been having up here in Canada, it's pretty insane. We've had so much snow. I think 40, 50 centimeters in the last week.
It's not that bad, but
there's nowhere to put it anymore.
Yeah.
You can shovel it on top of the other snow. Crazy. Yeah. But Jan-Niklas, tell us what are you actually doing when it comes to work? How did you come to this episode here? And a little bit about yourself.
So how I came to this episode is quite easy. I just slipped this envelope with a little bit of money over to you at a conference, and here I am. I don't know how that happened. Oh, sorry.
Wait, there's
just
money
happened
involved?
to me. Well, that is how you
cut it out.
No, so about myself, Jan-Niklas Wortmann, developer advocate at JetBrains for JavaScript and TypeScript. So I try to connect with all the JavaScript framework communities out there pretty much. And in a former life, I used to do consulting primarily for Angular applications. I did also at some point do a bigger React project. So I had this background. And at some point when I started DevRel, I was like, well, where can I improve my skills primarily to connect better with those communities? And Vue was a quite obvious choice. So, and the first conference for me was Vue.js Amsterdam, where we happened to have a booth. And I think that's where we met for the first time.
I think so.
Weren't you also doing a talk at the meetup before?
Yeah, it was not a talk. I was in the fishbowl discussion with Guillaume, I think, Eduardo, Evan, and so on, Vanessa, and so on. Yeah, exactly. In the JetBrains office, where the pre-meetup was last year. But yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so that's how I got into the Vue community, and since then the Vue community has been very open and welcoming. So I feel quite comfortable here.
So maybe a place to stay after seeing React and Angular. Time for some joy, so to say.
In terms of community dynamics, I'm always surprised how very different those communities are.
Why are they so different? Now I'm curious, because as you've been through some of them, please tell us.
The thing that I always loved about Angular, they have this, Angular team embraces that slogan a lot, is that mantra of come sit with us, right? They're very approachable at conferences. They're always out in the hallway, talking to people. So it's just a very welcoming and open community and gives this cozy feeling in a way. And I had very similar vibes at the Vue conference that I attended so far. So I just like that it felt right at home. The thing that I like a little bit more about Vue than about Angular is the openness to change. And that is, you can look at it however you want, but the Angular community has some very strong opinions and they're very strongly held. And I would wish that there's more of an open... The team actually embraces that a lot these days, which is kind of surprising, where it's the other communities are implementing signals. Maybe we should start looking at that.
Angular Renaissance.
Yes. Don't get me started on that. I probably need to. you need to get an explicit mark or something on that podcast then. But I would wish the Angular community was a little bit more in that sense. And the React community feels to me a little bit like this typical high school scenario where you kind of have like the cool kids, and it feels a little bit like that. So a little bit not quite as open as I was hoping for. To be fair, I also just attended a handful of React conferences so far, so that might have just been bad picks on my end.
I mean, besides conferences, you also like talk to people online, I guess. Sure. So it's not only like, hey, here are the 3 conferences I visited. I mean, in general, you're quite active online based on being a DevRel, but also before, I guess, you were. Yeah. So that also comes into play.
Yeah, it's just a great way to connect with various communities unrelated to like country boundaries, basically. So I like it.
Yeah, I said before on the podcast, but I haven't gone to any conferences outside of Vue. So I'd like to at least broaden my horizons a little bit, go to like a broader web development conference. And so that's something.
KCDC, if you're up for some good barbecue.
Okay.
Not too far away.
It's still surprisingly far away, but
not as far as Amsterdam, for example, or Tokyo, I guess. So yeah. Actually, I would love to apply, but unfortunately, I'm already booked there. So possibly next year. Yeah,
you should. Barbecue's pretty good.
I want to come for the barbecue and the conference, of course, right?
But, yeah.
Of course. No, but I'm really planning on doing that still. Cool. Yeah, will be fun. But Michael, maybe you find the time. I think the CFP is open until 4 or 5 days when we record.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So when you listen
just
to
enough
that
time.
Yeah, just enough time to apply. For all people listening, though, try it next time, I guess, because next year that's too late. But a lot of other conferences open as well. Looking for some call for papers or some meetups around like your local area. That's always a great way to start. I went to a Vue.js Hamburg actually last week, so when it comes out a couple of weeks ago, giving a talk there and seeing like people I have never seen before talking about Vue, feeling like a nice community. It's always lovely. So definitely visit your local meetup, or even better,
and meetups have like this cozy vibe that I mentioned before. Meetups are like peak for that because you have like this. You're just like a smaller group. It's great. I love going to meetups.
Wish there would be more around here. Though, well, after COVID,
Amsterdam is not bad, is it?
Amsterdam has a few. Yeah, I mean, it's not like I know before COVID, I feel like every like German city had one. I remember when I was there, like no problem. But nowadays, like Vue meetups, Hamburg just started again very happily, thanks to Zoe from the community who they said, okay, hey, let's do that. Let's bring it on. Then we have Berlin. There's Leipzig every 2 months, I think, and that's I think almost it with the Vue meetups.
You're originally from Leipzig, right?
I am actually, but I'm not affiliated with the meetup there, funnily. That was total coincidence, but I was there a couple of times, of course.
Great city.
Yeah, lovely. But in terms of meetups, I really think, like, getting, even with the JavaScript meetup, I think we had CJ here quite some episodes ago from Syntax and Coding Garden who talked about how the Denver Vue meetup basically got merged into like Denver.js and how that all happened. And it's also totally fine because a JS meetup, like everybody can bring in, hey, there's this cool framework or what's new and this and that. It's also, it lives from the plurality, so to say. So if that's something, go for it. We all, I feel like I say this so often, but I can't repeat it more and more enough. We need more content out there for your favorite framework out there, which is probably Vue. But if it's not, still, we need more content out there. If you like a Vue by proficiency, but your actual first love is Svelte or Solid, then bring out some content because the people will be really thankful on that.
So you're a super awesome DevRel at JetBrains.
Exactly.
And so I would like to know. Oh, okay. That's even better. Does that come with a pay raise? We can talk about that later.
Except the little envelopes at the conferences I heard. Yeah. That's the benefits.
So I've got a question about DevRel. So in the last couple of years, it seems like DevRel as an industry, or I guess as a profession or trade or skill or whatever word you want to use, it's kind of had some ups and downs. How is that feeling like right now from your perspective? Like currently, like you obviously have a job as a DevRel, but like how is the...
How long?
Like, how is it?
So the thing is, DevRel is definitely a little bit tricky because it's hard to prove your direct value. Like it's not that you can say, oh, I shipped like 15 features and there's the revenue was increased due to those features by X%. DevRel is not like that. if you're depending on the kind of DevRel you do, you might get into a position where you can be like, oh, I landed this big deal, but that's not the kind of DevRel that I personally enjoy doing. So it's very hard to prove the value. And therefore, DevRel is very often the first position in terms of layoffs or downsizing and those kind of things is let go. That's just a harsh reality. It's difficult to measure, and therefore, very often people don't see its value, even though they originally hired for that, which is very arbitrary, but whatever.
Is it a bit like comparable to, let's say, you have a project and you have less time or money, and the first thing you cut is docs and tests? Is that like the same idea in a way?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's not directly generating value in that sense, if I'm super brutally honest with my career choices.
But
yes,
wait, you said it's not directly generating value. So you mean it's more like it's not measurable, as said before? Because I mean, in the end, like if you like, I don't know, show off a company's product or explain certain things, release, I don't know, blog post or whatsoever, the value is, it's not like, as you said, a deal, but it's still something that people might connect with the brand.
Oh, absolutely. And I 100% agree. But then the thing that happens quite often is, well, why do we pay marketing then? If that's the line of thinking, right? If it's like brand awareness, that's a marketing thing.
Would you agree with that?
So the thing that I would agree with, and that's how we try to do it at JetBrains, is marketing tries to do brand awareness. Yes, marketing takes care. And I mean, JetBrains is very good for DevRel because we have a very clear who our users and who our customers are, developers. That's not always the direct case for people that work in the DevRel industry. But in our case, from my perspective, marketing takes more care of B2B, whereas me as a developer, I take care of our developers. I don't care at the end. And that's the thing that I often say, like, ideally, I want you to be better in what you're doing. If that happens to happen with our tools, great. If not, I still feel successful in my role. So therefore, I try to connect with developers. And that's pretty much how we distinguish that. I take care of developer-to-developer communication. Marketing takes care of big businesses and suits. That's at least the way that I like to look at it. And that works for us pretty well, particularly because we have a lot of big clients and stuff. And that's a little bit the other thing with DevRel that is kind of difficult is I've not talked to another DevRel who had exact same circumstances. Like DevRel is a very fluid position, very flexible in a way. And even within JetBrains, we have different DevRel people tackle the tasks very differently. Like I personally enjoy very much connecting with the community, so I'm very active on social media. Other people at JetBrains are fantastic writers, so they decided, oh, I should write a book. I would never write a book. So there are just very various ways how you can achieve the same goal to connect with developers in that sense. To your original question with the ups and downs, COVID was definitely very hard for DevRel as an industry, from my perspective. And it's still, particularly here in the US, where a lot of the VC money is coming from, like the general job market is not great right now, I would say. And I feel that there was also like this big bubble around developer tooling that was entirely backed on VC money and promises.
Do you have specific examples there?
I will not name names. Okay. Absolutely not. So that's for DevRel as an industry has been pretty hard. I know a lot of really talented folks that are way smarter than I, maybe not quite as good looking, but definitely smarter and probably also more hardworking that lost their job due to just like the circumstances. So it is definitely a risk for the industry. Part of that is also that DevRel not necessarily has the best name, that sometimes there are just like fancy marketing people and lose touch with like actual development. That is definitely a risk if you consider at some point going back to a normal developer job. So that was one of the things that was super important for me, is that I still code on a regular basis.
I can see it also being like a lot of fun in that. So one of the things that I like about what I'm doing now is that I get to do a whole bunch of different things. And it's not just like, okay, next ticket, work on this feature, work on this feature, work on this feature, just writing code. But I can actually, do some videos, do some podcasts, do some conferences, do some writing, and I get to like mix it up. And so there's that. But then this risk for me, because I'm basically like doing DevRel, but for myself, right? And so there is like this thought of like, okay, but I still have to be writing code, because at some point there might come a time where I don't want to do this anymore and I want to get a job somewhere else, right? And so like I don't want to be like have completely lost touch with everything and then not be able to jump back in. And so
I also very much feel like in the content you generate, it's very noticeable if a person is in constant touch with code or not. Like the general tone is very different, the topics are very different, and like how relatable and pragmatic in the end it is. Like how much can I actually use this, or is this more like a theory, conceptual thing?
I mean, also like from my perspective, being not like in an official DevRel position anywhere, but like the DevRel for Nuxt and maybe to some degree also Vue, but like, yeah, just doing it because being part of the core team and then starting to, explaining things, triaging issues, just also getting in touch with the people, be that in person at meetups, conferences, but also in the community itself and making sure, what problems do they have? What questions are there? So I might not be the best one to answer them, and that's totally fine. I think my job is more like, hey, which questions are there? Which repeating ones are there? How can we make sure they can be answered the best way? And then the answer being made available and accessible as easy as possible.
That is actually one of the things that I'm quite happy to tackle this year, because I connect with a lot of people on Twitter or something, but when they're saying like, oh, I have performance issues here, then the best thing I can do is developer, or like our developer, someone is having an issue, can you help them? Because I have no idea how to troubleshoot performance issues. So one of the things that I started this year, I started to get frustrated with that. Be like, okay, I can connect with the people very good, but I cannot concrete help them. The thing that we started now, and that is a very luxurious situation at JetBrains, is that 20% of my time I work on the WebStorm code base. So nice. Every Friday, I basically code in the project. I'll get bugs assigned, hopefully not too many. And this way, I just get direct exposure. I learn a little bit of Kotlin, which is nice.
Just want to say, it's no JavaScript there. It's all Kotlin. Yep.
It's all Kotlin. Well, you do need to like connect with LSPs and stuff that execute JavaScript, but different conversation.
Yeah, but we're getting towards the way of working towards JavaScript there. Yeah, okay.
But that was the thing that I was quite excited about, because it helps me connect with the community better, sharpen my skills directly, and also influence the product. Because that's the other thing that I like to do as DevRel is like, okay, how can we make sure that the product that we're offering fits the need of our users? Because right now I can say like, oh, this is a super important ticket, we should really do that. But if the PMM doesn't feel like it, slightly exaggerating, then I'm like kind of like staring a blank there. Whereas when I can just code it and file the merge request, then people are more inclined to just merge it.
Hey, here's a solution. You can just take it or wait for someone else.
Click a button.
Absolutely.
This is actually, by the way, how the Nuxt project template happened to happen, because someone at a conference mentioned that we don't have that. I wasn't aware of that. So I was like, kind of out of spite, was like, oh, we should really have that. So
yeah.
No, we haven't.
But when did it get released? I think I was talking.
Should be released already, I hope.
Okay. I didn't. I have to admit,
this is my second week of paternity leave, so I'm still catching up a little bit, but I think it should be released.
Okay.
Because let's just assume it is released.
Someone asked, like, usually, like, wasn't there like something that's with like a Nuxt template? But maybe, I don't know, there was like not the latest version whatsoever.
We had some issues, I remember, because there's actually, I forgot to create a ticket for that. If you, in the Nuxt, say create, or like the package manager, if you pass that, you don't maintain that information in the package JSON. So WebStorm is like, what's going on here?
Yeah,
it just tries to use NPM.
So like filling out the package manager field in the package JSON when running that. Yeah, it's a great idea to write an issue. Someone might tackle that. That's good. But
it's not merged yet, apparently.
It's not merged yet. Yeah, that fits with what I heard at least. But we're getting there.
Yes.
Maybe when this episode is out already, then there is a link down below where you can see how it works. And here are the release notes. Or maybe not. But of course, like things take time. But as you mentioned, I think having a more, let's say, holistic approach is just saying, okay, I'm the one connecting to people, understanding problems. If I can solve the problem or at least give a few more pointers, I also tried in the same way of like, okay, if there's a question that I can solve, happy to like, I don't know, update the docs, just answer people straight away, write a blog post, which is more rare, or video nowadays. If it's usually about like more context, best practices whatsoever. But very often it also can happen is like, I don't know. But if more people, of course, ask, or there's some specific things that I'm also curious about, like, I don't know, how do you bundle a whole Nuxt application in a single file? Like, how do you set up your bundle settings for that? This is not something that most people do.
Yeah.
And because usually you don't want to. But in some cases, like working with embedded systems, whatsoever, like, I need this one file.
So I have one more question for you in the DevRel vein of things. So you mentioned one of the things that you do is focusing on engaging, connecting with other developers. If you had to give a piece of advice to someone else doing that same sort of thing, what would be, I mean, maybe your best piece of advice or just a piece of advice, because it's kind of hard to figure out what the best one might be.
The best one is definitely find out where your community is. By far. It's extremely difficult to build a community, particularly around a paid product. It's just very difficult. This is brutally honest, the whole reason I'm still checking Twitter every day, because that's where a lot of our users still are. I don't want to make political endorsements on your podcast platform here, but I personally, for my own beliefs, would not use Twitter. But it is the place where our community is. The same way Discord is very actively used. I literally talked with Alex about that earlier. I'm way too stupid for Discord, not organized enough to get proper overview of what's going on. But that's where a lot of our users are. So it makes sense for me to figure it out someday.
On that note, by the way, Daniel Rowe, who was also in here a couple of times, actually built just himself a little bot, so-called Robot. I even have a thing for that here,
Beautiful.
I think. No, it's not this one. Wait, we get it. There we have it. A little soundboard I never used until now. But yeah, he built a little robot for Discord, just like, hey, let's gather the most interesting topics from these servers. You can do like as a self bot, so to say. They're not fully recommended because, well, every action they take are just, well, it's your account. So that's that. But that could be something, especially if you like a lot of servers. I also have that with like, I don't know, the Nuxt, the Vue, the Veed, the Tailwind, the this, that, and tons of servers. All amazing communities, but you can't read them all. But that could be interesting in terms of catching up there. But yeah, I mean, I also am a big fan of Blue Sky. I feel like right now, Justin Schrader mentioned that earlier today on Twitter. It's like dev Twitter is just very different. General like dev social media changed a lot, with like people being fragmented and not having a central place and not like nowhere that like interaction level that you had before. Maybe there will be better times. Fingers crossed for that. Let's see.
Quite honestly, it might also be depending on actually a friend of mine who's in DevRel, and turned out a couple of weeks after we met at a conference, it turned out that he lives like right across the street.
Oh, fun.
So he is in like the fintech sector. Like those people are not on Twitter. Those are like massive conferences where they meet like once or twice a year. So this is the place where your community.
Yeah,
it's not like Twitter or Reddit, and this depends on the product that you represent. It depends on the vibe of your community. And for WebStorm, which is mostly web dev, it happened to be very fragmented.
Yeah, true.
And that's the thing. If we want to connect with like the open source projects and stuff, that's more like Blue Sky right now for me. If it's like with our actual users, we see a lot more engagement on Twitter and those kinds of things. So depends a little bit.
But also circling back to, as you said, like finding where your community lives, I think this is so key. And that even depends like things outside of tech. If you're like into, let's say, bird watching or, I don't know, kite surfing or whatever, there are old school forums about it where people are still around posting a lot of things. Just like find out where it is, because that's the interesting space. Now, of course, that can also be a Reddit, which can be very nice, even though we heard differently in the episode of Aaron Francis earlier. It can also be sometimes not so nice place, but I've seen a lot of very lovely subreddits with mostly happy people. I'm not kidding.
So I have actually a funny Reddit story that I'm still mildly terrified by and I mean, people, it's all publicly available, so it's not hidden.
Links in the show notes.
When we first published our AI assistant WebStorm and JetBrains IDEs, we had some design decisions that our users were not quite happy about. We changed them, and part of that was just miscommunication, as it often is, but some of them were also just not well designed. Well, it turned out that we had like U-Track, our bug ticket manager. People were like going ape shit of like, we're stealing data, and like,
wow.
I don't want to slightly tinfoil hat territory of like all the evil things we're doing. Whereas on Reddit, people were like, well, it sounds like a bug. They should just fix it, and end of the story. And then I was like, okay, if Reddit is less toxic than your own bug tracking, that's a problem.
Yeah. True.
So,
I agreed. But that's a very nice, lovely Reddit story. I expected a different outcome here.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. No, that was
Don't post
the
it
more
to Hacker
positive
News.
one.
Oh, Hacker News. Oh, yeah. Let's not get into that territory here. By the way, if anyone out there has a funny Reddit or Hacker News story, share them in the comments or on social media with us. We'll definitely have a look. Like Aaron, but it was not that funny last episode, but it was still something we hope will come back to the Vue Reddit in the future when a new version of Fusion is out. But going back to JetBrains, we've mentioned JetBrains a couple of times now, and maybe for the people who may be new to development and have not heard of JetBrains itself before, maybe you could just briefly talk about what JetBrains is and this thing like WebStorm and why DevRel maybe, especially for the dev community and your company's aspect, is a bit different than maybe from others.
So JetBrains, actually we celebrated our 25 years last week or 2 weeks ago.
Congrats.
Thank you. So we are completely privately owned developer tooling company. Our most known product are our IDEs, WebStorm, IntelliJ, PHP Storm. Rider has a pretty big community. We now have one for Rust. And so we basically have different IDEs for different languages. That is the way that people look at it. The most obvious that all of those are in a mono repository and you have basically like all the web support and the other products available. So we do developer tooling. We also have, other than our IDEs, which are our like most known products, we have a bug tracking tool, we have a static code analysis tool, we have AI tools, we have DevOps CI/CD tools. So the thing is, and I'm not quite sure about the history, but for some reason we have an aversion to buying software. So we develop them ourselves and then we sell them.
Interesting.
And this worked really, really well for IntelliJ.
Yeah.
This works really, really well for Kotlin, which is the programming language that we do. This could work better for our less known products, but different story. So that's what we do. We are like, I think we're like 2,000 something people working on developer tooling.
It's really interesting that, like, in a way that also resembles, I think, the average developer that says like, oh, I would not pay X euros a month or like as a one-time payment for that software. I'd rather take hours and weeks to build myself. But then you go to step and say like, hey, we can sell it because it's a good product. So that's a step people are missing out sometimes.
It's a little bit, I like to kind of compare our products to MacBooks, right? Like you're getting a MacBook because everything just works. You don't want to deal with like WSL or whatever the Linux thing on Windows is. And the Windows file system is still slow. Tools don't work well. So, and that's kind of the idea of like our tools. Ideally, it should just work and you shouldn't bother about it so that you can write more code.
Interesting. Michael, did you ever try out WebStorm or PHP Storm or IntelliJ in the past?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was just thinking like I've heard about JetBrains and I've like seen it around obviously like so like my entire career, but for whatever reason there was never that like push to try it out. Maybe it's just like I find that I'm very reluctant to try tools and things like that, and like you know, even like the Nuxt dev tools, it was like, you know, a couple weeks ago that I was like, okay, I should probably dig into what this, like I've looked at it, but I never like learned it enough to actually use it regularly. I'm still like, you know, console logging things out into the dev tools. And so I was like, okay, re-recording, mastering Nuxt, I should probably include, you know, dev tools in there. Let me figure this out for this course. And so I'm like finally doing it, you know.
Changing tools is definitely a huge cost.
Yeah.
And muscle memory is a real thing.
Yeah, just getting used to stuff again. Like, this is crazy, even though it will possibly boost productivity. Same with like using debugger instead of console log.
Yeah.
In a lot of times it's super helpful, but if you do, it's like, okay, what now, here, there. It's just like that. Sometimes it's just like this. The hard part of getting started is actually getting started with getting started. So,
yeah,
like it's tough. But yeah, it's really interesting in that sense that like I think with a lot of developers it's the same of like, okay, here's a new tool, cool, but we have something that works, so instead of changing that and like taking hours to relearn shortcuts or remapping stuff or configuring things, why not stick with what we have, which I guess works at least 80% as good, or even better, who knows, because it didn't try out a new tool.
And that was partially also on us because our software is coming from a more traditional background. With like 20 years ago, it was like very common to pay for professional tools. Like no one, and still to this day, for if you're like in testing or database tools, like no one bats an eye at throwing $1,000 at a license. So we always charge for our products because at the end we need to pay salary like mine, which I'm very glad about.
Doesn't only work with envelopes at conferences, I heard. So that will be the running game. Sorry.
So we always charge for our product. And last year we made the decision to offer WebStorm free for non-commercial usage. And this way, if you decide, hey, I want to look into what the deal is, if it might be able to boost my productivity without before that we had a 30-day free trial or something like that. You don't have this time pressure. Okay, I need to learn this now and then make the decision. Do I need to pay or do I want to pay for it now? So this was I think, good thing, particularly in the web ecosystem, where I'm glad we made that change.
For people who are more familiar with VS Code or Cursor or whatever fork.
What? Never heard.
It's just, some people use it, and I like to use it.
Here we go.
I write it. I actually use pen and paper, and then I take photos. And anyway,
and AI will then transform it.
Yeah, it actually works surprisingly well.
That explains a lot of your code, Michael, that I've never seen, but it must be horrific good. Terrific good, I mean.
Yeah,
still.
You have to really think through what you're doing. It's a benefit. What are some of the reasons that I might want to check it out and
So if we talk on a high level basis, the most obvious thing is VS Code has a massive ecosystem of plugins, which is great if you exactly know the plugins that you want and need, which is less great if you don't know what plugins you might want or could be helpful. Mm-hmm. There's a reason that there are 500 the best 10 VS Code plugin blog posts out there. So WebStorm has a little bit of a different philosophy here, where it's more on a technical level, all our products are basically a mix of plugins too. So technically it's the same, but we develop a lot of those plugins and pre-install them. So if you install WebStorm, you can develop Vue applications right away. You don't need to install anything additionally. There might be something like rainbow brackets or something that you want just for or themes that you like that you can install, but to develop Vue application, we want to have you everything out of the box. That's a big thing for us. We come with Git tools, we come with database tools, we come with testing tools, debugging, everything just works ideally. I'm saying intentionally ideally because obviously there are sometimes bugs and it's still software. Right. That's just the way it is. But the idea is we want to get you started right away. We don't want you to set up everything. If we talk more on a technical level, we have a different way how we look at code. VS Code usually primarily just uses language servers, which are maintained by library authors or other teams. Usually they're also some are maintained by VS Code. It's a little bit more complex, but language server are basically protocol that defines how the current file that is open, how you would want to interact with that, basically. So on a very high level, it tells you how you want to resolve symbols, for instance, right? If you say go to definition on a TypeScript symbol, go to that file where that is coming from. And those kind of features are offered by a language server. We do that a little bit different. It's a little bit more complex than that because what we do is we write our own Lichter and parser usually, so we know a lot about your code base. And we also integrate directly with tools like Beat and stuff to know where those things are coming from and can therefore offer features on top. Now, the thing where it now gets tricky is particular Vue is pretty complex and a very fast moving ecosystem. So in the case of Vue, we decided to go with, we have an official name now that I just forgot, again, back from paternity leave. But we basically have something like a hybrid mode where we use the language server for some things, but still use our own Lichter and parser under the hood to be able, for instance, one thing that we now added, which I can now shamelessly promote here, is if you go and rename nuxt component, it will rename all the instances in the templates. A language server itself cannot do that because there's no hook that you get triggered. Hey, a file has changed that you might be interested in.
But also the auto-imported ones. So you don't even have to, okay, that's very sweet. Yeah. Because I remember with auto-imports, a lot of people are what's with refactoring? And then people are maybe some kind of extension for the IDE could solve that, some tooling. So that's
theoretically, yes.
If that also works with composables and utils, then well.
I don't know. I need to check that.
Yeah, I mean, if it works for components, then probably implementing that for the same way shouldn't be hopefully too difficult. I would love to see that.
And language server itself are usually pretty bad at doing things cross languages. I mean, if you look at Vue, you have always this composition of HTML, CSS, and TypeScript. Hopefully TypeScript. Let's say TypeScript.
Possibly TypeScript.
And like things you change in your TypeScript file might affect your HTML, and even vice versa. We have like, you can rename classes in CSS. Like those things just work in WebStorm because we use our language support and provide that on top of what the language server already provides. So you get those added benefits. And then there's this IDE aspect of like, okay, if you have vtest set up, it will automatically just work and you can run debugging and all those things. You don't need to like figure out the debugging config or launch JSON thing that I've heard someday about. So that is the big philosophy. We want you to get started. We don't want you to mess with tooling, ideally.
Yeah, your comparison that you mentioned before of like a MacBook versus, a Linux machine or something like that makes a lot of sense. Or like,
I don't know why our marketing team doesn't use that. It's perfect.
iPhone versus Android. Like that makes sense to me of like,
Yeah.
you get the iPhone because you want it to all work and it's highly sandboxed and that you can't do a lot of things. And, but that's kind of the point, is that it's kind of figured out for you. Whereas, yeah, you get Linux because you want to tinker with things and screw around with it. And
I think it was a while ago where Anthony was tweeting Anthony through why he was using VS Code, and the customization aspect of that is a big thing. And I mean, he writes like 15 VS Code plugins.
Yeah. In JavaScript or TypeScript, not in Kotlin.
Yeah. So I'm absolutely convinced that VS Code is the best choice for him. But I'm also very much convinced that WebStorm, if you're developing a B2B application for a big corporate, is probably the better tool. So it depends on like what you're doing from my perspective, and also how much fiddling do you like. I mean, in my former life, we're not on record, right?
No,
I've used
never.
VS Code as
just as your fuss.
I've used VS Code too. I mean, there are probably talk recordings out there from me where I used VS Code, but every so often I then had that some plugin doesn't work anymore or it's not compatible with something else, and then you're like, you can yell at the cloud or at a GitHub ticket that something is not working. Whereas when you pay for software, you can yell at a company, which feels a little bit better. And yell at a company in that sense would mean me, which is not so nice. So maybe we cut that part out.
Just be kind.
A nice message.
Jan-Niklas, this feature doesn't work, and I have performance issues. Can you help me debugging? Here we go.
If you have an envelope, like I can help you all day long.
Yes.
Or good brew of coffee, of course.
Yes. Yes.
But it's very interesting. So I remember in my early days when I started university, I was a lot into PHP, and we covered it also a couple of episodes ago there. And people are like, okay, what kind of IDE use? And people are like PHP Storm. And I remember I was sitting in like uni class, like, okay, so how to get as a student PHP Storm for free? And I was thinking of various ways until one of my friends was saying like, what are you doing there? Why like, you can just get a free student license. Because of like some corporations. So like, oh, that's sweet. So yeah, well, since then I started using PHP Storm and WebStorm. And I remember when I then went to conference, everyone was like, oh, VS Code is so fast. And to be fair, it took a while to boot up certain things because of course everything comes with all things included. That's in a way the price to pay, especially of course with bigger projects, but it's especially with PHP projects was sometimes I don't know, 2018, 17, something like that. So also a while ago. And then I was also like, okay, I used PyCharm for a while as well. So the Python editor, it works very lovely. I really enjoyed how much customization in terms of formatting, for example, was possible to say, okay, this bracket should be definitely there, but only if the function is still long. There were a lot of options, but somehow it was also really difficult to align, at least back then, right? This probably has changed a gazillion times with the default, like not the default, I think the format is called black or something, not entirely sure, or like it doesn't matter too much. It's like, okay, let's format it this way, save. And it's a bit what VS Code does with like prettier and Estland fighting. It was a bit similar there. Yeah. So actually I raised 2 tickets. I was like,
appreciate that.
I was like, I want to make this work. Why not? And I think one of them got fixed like pretty quickly. And every now and then I get still like an info about one of them because it's also like not that important. It's not a critical bug. And if people want to use a formatter, they can just disable formatting in general. But some years ago, me, it was like, that should work together. So,
I fully agree. And if you come like from our main product, IntelliJ, was for Java development. And like there were till not even sure if there's a formatter for Java out there right now that is like that, like the community agrees on. So like coming from that mindset and shipping a product with a formatter totally makes sense. Yeah. And even every now and then when I'm like just scribbling something myself where I'm like, okay, this is just for me. I don't even need to bother about setting up ESLint prettier because I don't make mistakes. Then like having the formatter built in is nice. But I've honestly, like in most applications I worked in, the formatter is the first thing that I disable and just say use prettier. Because at the end of the day,
some people disagree here though. So ESLint is not a format I heard multiple times from Josh Goldberg, for example.
Yep, I have to agree with Josh on that.
I understand that. I still like the stylistic rules, and I'm happy that Anthony kept them an extra package.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's nice for the people that use it, but I agree with Josh.
Yeah, fair. I mean, there are also tons of other formatters out there, but in a way, it's also understandable that, first of all, tooling is so much more than just formatting, and formatting is so much bike shedding. So just like, if there is a community option, using it, like it can be prettier, it can be whatever, like formatter you use and rules apply, but why not? So I get that, even though sometimes the results are not looking nice, but that's part of following a standard formatter, so to say.
Yeah. But one of the things that I actually really like about our integration, you mentioned it is slower because the thing we're collecting at the beginning about your code base just takes time. Think about it like we basically built the AST for your entire project and also AST across languages, kind of. So if you have like a Vue file, we know all the HTML references and TypeScript imports that you use. So
comes super handy, yeah.
And that's the thing, like it takes time at the beginning, but you usually, ideally, there are projects where you switch between projects 500 times a day, but ideally you work on one big project, you started once at the beginning of the day, or my MacBook is running for months at a time usually. So then that happens at the beginning, and yes, that takes time, but then like go to definition, for instance, is much faster, whereas on VS Code, at the time when you say navigate to symbol or go to definition, I don't quite know how they call it, at that time they will traverse the AST tree to figure out where is this coming from. So it's a little bit of like a chicken egg, kind of like, okay, how do I look at that? VS Code will always be fast. Kind of like that.
So to say, yeah.
But this allows us, for instance, to say, so one feature we have also now recently is show usages. So if you have a Vue component and the HTML part, you say, hey, show me all the references. And even if you like Nuxt and use like auto import, that just works.
That's really cool.
So that's really nice. So we are getting close to the end of the time we have here. Are there things is there something you wanted to mention before we do our wrap up and everything so we can let you go?
There are actually two things that I think are worth mentioning. Let's make it 2.5.
Okay, I'm curious about the half. Yeah.
So the first thing that I would like to mention here, even though we use Volar and the Vue language server, and you've probably seen that, we still had typing issues sometimes where like types are not properly resolved for some parts because we still use our own type engine that is dated back to TypeScript 0.8 and iterated over that.
Ooh.
And we never achieved, like, particularly with the pace that the TypeScript team moves and the crazy things they do sometimes, we never achieved like 100% compatibility. We had like, for a lot of things we were faster, but we had like probably like 5 to 10% where we just returned utter nonsense for the type resolution. So we are changing our TypeScript engine to use the TypeScript language server. And that is going to be pretty interesting from an implementation perspective, because that's a project that's going on for 1.5 years at this point. Because even though you might just think, oh, TypeScript files should be easy enough, TypeScript literally uses everything in WebStorm is powered by TypeScript. And that even goes to HTML files.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
Every quick documentation uses TypeScript. Literally every feature in TypeScript in WebStorm uses TypeScript in one way or another. So therefore, it's just like getting the compatibility right, very tricky. The thing you can do for that to help us, and that is now the shameless plug, is go in the settings in Vue, and there it says TypeScript language server or TypeScript server, something like that. Hopefully it says also something like experimental because it's still in development. But turning that on can help us find still like gaps that we might have. That would be very appreciated because the project should end hopefully at some point.
Features should be shipped, not only in experimental. Yeah. In that note, do you have like a little blog post or tutorial somewhere where we can link to people just in case?
Yes, I can send you one that we wrote like 1.5 years ago when we first published that flag. Yeah, yes, I'll provide that.
All in the show notes. Help the JetBrains team out there and use TypeScript, the TypeScript server default.
Yes, that would be pretty nice if we can make more progress there. The other thing that I want to shamelessly plug here, because we see that quite often that people use Cursor and WebStorm at the same time. Cursor for fantastic AI features and WebStorm for fantastic refactoring features. One thing I would highly encourage you to do is check out Junie. Great name. It is basically our answer to an agentic AI approach. So like editing multiple files at the same time and being more conversational than like a chat might be. It uses Claude under the hood. So the results that I've seen so far are very, very promising. And that is another thing that I would recommend you checking out, particularly if you're in that situation of like, I like WebStorm, but Cursor just makes me more productive. This might be a good answer for that.
So basically, you also like catching up in the AI race, so to say.
Catching up is such a harsh word.
I'm sorry. This just sounds like, hey, we use Cursor, but we have that as well now. And I'm not even saying like I'm catching up to the same level, but maybe also catching up and passing over the rest.
So just on the catching up team, like our machine learning team they have showed some pretty cool things about like semantic search. I mean, you know that in VS Code, it's Command P, I think, to go to a symbol. Hopefully, in a future version of WebStorm, you'll be able to say, "Hey, take me to the logout form," and like more like conversational. So I'm just saying that.
Yeah, okay. There's some
sweet,
good stuff coming there, especially if you like have the whole AI capabilities at your power plus the code base and the ASTs that are generated. So that's the other thing.
Yeah.
So and that really good for huge code bases where you
just want to say yes.
I know that I can see I can get to the feature in the UI, but like where is this code? And you can just describe it, and it'll be like, oh, there, that file.
And like with having everything built into our products, we can also run like sanity checks on the results of the IDE. That's another nice thing that language server is not really possible. We can say like, hey, does the code compile?
Yes or no? Yeah. Fair.
Oh, okay. So those were the 2 points. And the half point is some people get slightly frustrated by filing tickets in UTrack, which I get is not the best experience, but it's very beneficial for us. So if you have issues, and even if I would highly encourage you rather to create a ticket than looking for if there's already an existing ticket or something. It's better to have something twice than having it not at all. So that would be the half thing. If you have issues right now, would like see things improved or have any ideas for us, we really appreciate that kind of input, because that's a little bit of the problem with WebStorm in particular. Our developers are Kotlin developers, so they develop Kotlin. Some of them have a background in JavaScript, but it's not that they are developing Vue application on a daily basis. So the feedback that you have for us is very, very valuable. So if you have any ideas or complaints, either shoot them my way or UTrack. Either way.
And also links to that, of course, in the description, both or the show notes. So to Jan-Niklas, DM straight away or to the UTrack.
Yep.
Nice.
That works.
Great. Cool. Then, yeah, let's wrap it up here, Niklas. Maybe there are like 2 last questions. And the first one is there anything besides JetBrains Junie and the experimental TypeScript server feature that you want to plug?
I do. You're such a great host. I do. So, well, I feel a little bit mean to do that now, but Alex, you mentioned before, I'm a huge coffee nerd. And if you think like, oh, you probably get Starbucks every day. No. I'm a huge coffee nerd. So if you're at a conference and don't feel like talking about tech stuff, I can talk about coffee way too long. But one thing that I'm working on right now is publishing a newsletter. And hopefully by the time that this episode goes out, the newsletter is live. So it's weekly Devs Brew. Think about it kind of like I want to like create a curated list of like good content that I think is very valuable to know. I don't want to like tie to a niche, because a lot of newsletters are like, here's what's new in React, here's what's new in Angular or something. I want it to be like across the ecosystem. And the other thing is often blog posts are very clickbaity, where it's like, here are the 10 best things you should know about. I want to go for like a very chill vibe, like kind of like you're drinking the first cup of coffee in the morning or you're working in a coffee shop, right? Like I want you to relax, read a little bit, educate, and that's a vibe that I'm going for. So if you want to do me a personal favor and subscribe to that, I would very much appreciate it. I will put the link in the show notes.
Yeah, we will have it there for sure. Even if it's not out, then there will be like some kind of waitlist demo page whatsoever. So people do it there, down there. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that here. Officially, it's basically the other people I know it already if it's out already, but you said it here first, so to say.
Yes, that's very true.
On the lovely DejaVue podcast. And Jan-Niklas, last but not least, I know time is running, so where can people follow you? Not only to ask all the questions about WebStorm, but also for just chatting with coffee.
Blue Sky. So it's wortmann.dev, which is a joke on my name, which is like German for word and man. So I just use the English word and man because explaining that it sounds similar, but it's not quite an English name. Got kind of tedious. So it's wortmann.dev.
Perfect. And Niklas, thank you so much for coming on there. We have so much more to cover. We didn't talk much about Volar, just a little bit about LSPs or Angular and Vue altogether. I think there is just one way to solve it. We have to get you back on here in the future.
That sounds great. Anytime. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and for everybody else, if this is not the latest episode, then, just continue listening, stay tuned. And if this is the latest episode, then check out the older ones as well. We already talked about some episodes in here. We already talked about DevRel as well earlier, almost a year ago, in episode 7 with Mark Bacchus. And also, check out all the rest. So hope to see you in the next episode or previous one. Stay tuned, and until then, bye, folks.